Hello and welcome to Unwind Sessions, where right after my shift I give the highlights of my workday, and I hope to do so live with a Q&A right after. My name is Juan. I am an English Spanish medical video remote interpreter with over 4 years of experience. Today is Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. Today I took 23 calls, so it was kind of a slow day. There were some break in betweens, and there were more video calls and phone calls today. There wasn't really that much uh, uh, hard or challenging sessions today, but there were three that I would like to point out. One of them was that there was a therapy session, a speech therapy. They were watching the swallowing of a how a little girl would chew and swallow her food. And at one point, there was a time, there were three therapists. I don't remember. I know it was a speech therapist, and I don't remember the other two therapists that were there. But all of a sudden, they just started to have like a conversation back and forth, the three providers and the patient. And I couldn't keep up with it. It was just too much information, and who was saying what and what was being answered. But the funny thing is that at the end, it actually turns out that none of them were actually understanding each other. So they actually had a really big conversation, and nobody understood each other. So one of the providers asked me if I could interpret everything that was said. I, of course, had to let them know that I couldn't. I really couldn't do it. I couldn't keep up with all the information that was said, and then they were speaking over each other. So I really didn't know what they were talking about either. And I let them know this. And one of the providers said, "Okay, yeah, no problem." And she went ahead and let me know what they wanted me to ask. And I asked, and right after that, we just continued with the session as normal. There was no other challenging points or anything else that happened during that call. It was a pretty smooth call, except for that. Sometimes you're, like I said before, you're going to be asked to do things that go way beyond your skill or your abilities, and it's okay to say no. Don't be scared to say no. It's better to say no and to actually get them to give you something that you can actually work with than feeling bad because you think they're going to think you're a bad interpreter and actually doing a very bad job. So you should already know this. This shouldn't come as a surprise. But yeah, I mean, like I say, every day is just something different, and every day you're gonna be asked to, well, not asked. Every day you're gonna have to work challenging situations, and yeah, sometimes you might be asked to do more challenging things, like I will describe on the last point that I would like to mention. Um, Another thing that happened today, this had never happened before. There was a little girl that was going to get a suppository, and I was right there. Like, they literally put me in front of the little girl. They usually just put me in front of the patient's mother, and the provider didn't think much of it. She's told the little girl to lower down her pants, and she was starting to lower down her pants when I didn't feel comfortable with the situation, and I let the provider know that if she could move the screen for patient privacy. And she said, "Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot." And she went ahead and moved it. Um, I mean, I don't really think much of it, but for some reason, I mean, they think of you as the medical provider. Some people just undress in front of you, and there's nothing much to think about that. But I don't know. This just comes down to personal preference, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't mind somebody looking at me, uh, but I know that it makes people uncomfortable, and this was a little girl. So I actually opted to ask the provider to look away and I mean, to turn the screen another way. And she did, not a problem. But sometimes you don't even get that opportunity. Everything just happens so fast. and you don't even get the opportunity to let the provider to turn the screen for patient privacy. And it's okay, you're not required to do it, but I just think that it actually makes the other person more comfortable. But more than anything, it makes me feel more comfortable. I don't want them to think like I'm a perv. I really am. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm not. But um, it actually like I don't know. It makes me feel like a sense of respect. Sometimes when they're getting dressed in front of me, I actually like look down or something. I don't know why I feel uncomfortable, but I do. So that is just one of the things that I do. You can do it or not. It's up to you. This is one of those things that it really is up to you. Whatever you feel comfortable with. And most of the time, like people do hesitate though. They don't like getting naked in front of the interpreter or in front of me. I couldn't say about the interpreters. I don't know. But in my case, they always get a little squeamish, a little uncomfortable. So I always like look away or ask the provider if they could move the screen away or put me in, or they just black out the screen or cover my camera or whatever. It's all the same thing. So yeah, that's one thing that I do. That's just personal preference. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is that I was interpreting for a counseling session with the provider and the patient and the daughter of the patient. They were having like a little session, but the um, the the patient's daughter spoke English, so the provider actually was nice enough to tell me if I can go ahead and interpret the conversation they were having, and she actually asked the person, "Do you think it's good if the interpreter interprets what I ask your daughter before I ask it, and then he interprets what your daughter says after she says what she has to say, and then he interprets so that way you can understand everything?" And I thought, oh wow, this is going to be easy. But it really wasn't. It really wasn't. Let me tell you why. Because the provider just said that, but I think she really didn't care or forgot about it. Because she would just have these conversations with the patient's daughter, like in English, completely forgetting that I was even there or letting me interpret. And I kept up pretty well. This time I kept up pretty well because it was being asked of me, so I already knew what I was getting into. And I actually did a pretty good job of interpreting what they said. But there were some times when the lady, I think she forgot that there was an interpreter there and interpretation needed to be done for the patient because she would just go on and on and on and on, and they would just have this conversation like if we were not even there. And all of a sudden, she would ask the patient, "Hey, miss, did you understand everything that was said, or do you want Juan to interpret for you?" And sometimes the lady would say, "I want Juan to interpret for me." Sometimes she would say, "I understood everything." So whenever she said, "I need the interpretation," I would actually interpret it in the following way. I'll be like, the counselor said this, your daughter answered this, the counselor said this, your daughter answered this, the counselor said this, and that's how I did it. And whenever she said no, then I was like, oh man, you just saved me so much work, and I would just continue writing the new stuff. Um, I usually don't like to do this like that because it just gets a little confusing, like remembering who said what, and then if they're talking, like whenever one person talks, it's easier to follow the conversation because they usually just follow a certain story. But whenever, so it's easier to remember. But whenever more than one person is talking and they're having a conversation, they usually go from one topic to the next, and it's a little hard to remember the story. That's why I don't like to do it. I do it. I do it when it's asked of me, but sometimes I do have to accept that, you know what, is just a little hard and I'm not gonna be able to do it. But I always try. I feel like it's challenging and it's worth a try. You know, you can always, if you're not keeping up, you can always let them know and maybe give you shorter segments. But I believe I have a good memory and I like to challenge my memory, and I believe that every aspect of a challenge is only going to make it better. So I go for it. And sometimes I can't make it. Sometimes I do have to ask and apologize and let them know, or maybe um, get them to like I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. My mom just got here and I can hear her through the door. But sometimes you just have to let them know that it was a little too challenging, and if they could please repeat what they said in shorter sentences. And that's okay. I mean, not everyone will be able to recall really, really long sentences. You really need a lot of practice. But one important thing that you're gonna get out of it is if you say yes to all of the challenges, then you are going to know your limits. You're going to know the limits of your interpretation, and that is going to make you a better interpreter because you already know your limits. And whenever somebody asks something of you, then you will already know if you can actually do it or not, and you will accept or you will decline. So I think that it's very important to actually take the jump, take the leap into the deep end and see if you can paddle and swim and make it to the other side into safety. But that's just me. That's pretty much all that I have for today. Once again, please leave your questions in the comments and I will answer a couple of them on the next session. Like I've stated before, I'm gonna be here every Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. to around 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time. Whenever I get to doing the live thing, I think I'm gonna start looking into that next week. I have a couple of days off, so that is just the time to do it. So I won't be here, but I'll be here this whole week, and that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe if you like the video, and have not done so for more content. And don't forget to share. Happy interpreting. Goodbye.